Hello everyone and welcome back to Nate the Hoof Guy. Today's video we are looking at this foot right here. We've got a lesion underneath here. We're going to need to remove this loose horn, and this lateral claw has also got some issues with it. So we're going to talk about that as well. So stick with us. Let's get to work. So as I mentioned earlier, this foot's got a couple of different problems going on. Right now, we're working on the medial claw, and there is an ulcer that we need to uncover there. That in itself is an oddity in that typically ulcers are going to show up on the lateral claws on back feet. The other thing that's strange is that lateral claw is not, if you notice, is not of a normal shape as well. It's got a very wide appearance to it, and that is due to laminitis. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So what exactly is laminitis? Well, in the very basic terms, it is inflammation of the lamina inside the foot. And what the lamina do is support the pedal bone and attach it to that outside wall. So basically the weight comes down through the bones of the foot, of the leg, into the bones of the foot, and that pedal bone is attached to that outside wall via the lamina. When those lamina become inflamed, what you end up having is less support, and more of that weight then and more of that trauma is then applied to the corium instead of to that hoof capsule and ultimately around the corium into the sole. So what you end up getting is that outside wall will start to flare out from that poor connection, and you'll end up with a foot that's really wide like this. Some call it pancake foot. Paddle toe is another term, and what that means basically is that the structural integrity of that foot becomes flattened and elongated, and that's why we have this really wide appearance here. We've got some separation in that outside wall, and there's some hemorrhaging as well in this foot that I want to investigate, because as we take a look at this medial claw later on here, you're going to see there's an ulcer in there. I know I want to put a block on this claw, this lateral claw. You can see there's some hemorrhaging in there, so I want to make sure that that doesn't go all the way in and that there's not a problem. And I can tell already it's starting to fade away, so I'm not worried about that. But back over to this medial claw, we've got an ulcer in here, and this is a problem. So I need to remove all of this loose horn here to expose that lesion, and we'll make determinations on what's going to happen next after that. I get questions all the time about why don't you wash this foot off completely before you start working on it. And as you watch me trim here, you'll see exactly why I don't do that. As I'm removing these layers of loose horn, I still, at this point, haven't exposed that lesion yet. So had I washed that foot at the beginning, I would still, as I remove this layer, you'll see there's dirt and debris underneath these layers of hoof. So what I do is remove these layers to expose that lesion and then clean it as I go. Now an analogy would be to, it would be like as if you were going to wash your hands with your gloves on, right? You wouldn't do that because obviously the gloves are going to keep your hands from getting clean if you're washing the glove. You remove the gloves, then wash the hand. Same type of situation here. We're removing this loose horn before we clean this lesion. As I work along, I might spray a little bit in there just to expose the margins of the lesion so I know exactly where to make my cuts. But as far as a thorough cleaning ahead of time, it doesn't provide any advantage whatsoever to do that. And especially in the climates that we live in Wisconsin, a lot of the winter, we have to deal with really cold temps, which means a lot of water would mean a lot of ice. And ice and cows do not mix whatsoever. So I try to avoid a wet situation whenever possible. In fact, I tend to bring sawdust and things to dry up my working conditions rather than make them wet. But as I work here, I'm exposing this lesion now. I'm going to get it as I work, clean it up as I go to expose it like I said, and to have a more clean working environment once I get to the lesion. But this isn't a situation where we're dealing with like on a human skin disinfecting before we start cutting. This has already been contaminated underneath, so I need to remove those layers before I can really thoroughly clean this lesion. The spray I use is called Chlorhexidine. It's an antiseptic, and it's got a unique property in that it binds to keratin, which is what makes up hoof. So we get a little bit longer lasting protection from that, and that's why I use it. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to want to block this foot, and what that means is I'm just going to glue a rubber block to this lateral claw, that outside claw, and that's going to take weight off of this medial claw and make sure that there's no pressure applied to it so that that lesion can heal that I've been working on. I'm just cleaning up now. I was spraying some Chlorhexidine on that I got on that hoof. I just want to take that layer off to make sure that I get good contact with my glue and that it makes that block stick really well. If you're wondering why I wait till the end of the trim to apply that block, it's simply because I don't want that block in my way when I'm trying to cut around lesions, especially when I'm trying to cut and work in between the toes. That block just gets in the way. The glue sets up really fast. Within 3 minutes, it's fully cured. In the summertime, even faster than that, so it really doesn't hinder my performance by waiting to put that on later. Here we can swing in, get a good look at that lesion. You can see where it started to heal up. You can get some new horn production around the edges and how it's protruding through the sole there. But it's got some a little bit of an odd discoloration to it, which makes me think there could be some dermatitis set in. So as you've seen in other videos, what we're going to do is we're going to get it cleaned up really well, and then I'm going to apply a salicylic acid wrap. And what that does, salicylic acid is great at having any dead or dying tissue. It helps slough that away, as well as kill the bacteria that cause digital dermatitis. And that's the big thing here, that discoloration. If we've got any dermatitis on that, what'll happen is it'll keep that area open and prevent that corium from producing new horn, and we'll end up with a lesion that becomes a chronic issue. It'll just continue to be there. It'll continue to become inflamed. So we put that wrap on, take care of that, and this foot should heal up beautifully. I had a little bit of glue on the edges here that needed to get cleaned up, so I just buzzed that off with the grinder, and then we'll put this foot down. As you'll notice, the other foot on this back foot of this cow has also got a wrap on it. She had a little bit of dermatitis on that, so I put a wrap on that to take care of that. And now let's let her go and check out how she's walking. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you all on the next one.